Most people think high blood pressure always gives obvious signs: a pounding headache, dizziness, feeling weak or unwell. So if they feel normal, they assume everything must be fine. But that assumption can become dangerous after 60, because blood pressure problems often stay completely silent for years. I've spoken with people who were gardening, walking their dogs, enjoying dinner with family, just days before discovering something serious was happening inside their cardiovascular system. No dramatic warning, no clear signal, nothing that forced them to slow down. That's what makes nighttime blood pressure so important. And strangely, it's one of the least discussed parts of heart health for older adults. Most blood pressure readings happen during quick daytime appointments. One reading, a few seconds. Then the visit moves on. But think about this. There are 86,400 seconds in a day, and your blood pressure is usually checked for less than a minute. Meanwhile, nearly 1/3 of your life is spent sleeping. That's where the body is supposed to recover. During healthy sleep, blood pressure naturally lowers for several hours overnight. This gives the heart and blood vessels a chance to rest. The body repairs. The nervous system resets. Blood vessels relax. That nighttime dip matters far more than many people realize. But after 60, something often changes quietly in the background. Blood vessels become less flexible. The nervous system becomes less predictable. Stress hormones may not follow the same healthy rhythm anymore. And for many older adults, blood pressure stops lowering properly during sleep. Some people even experience higher pressure at night than during the day. The difficult part is that most people never notice it. They simply wake up tired, foggy, restless, and assume it's just age or poor sleep. A man named Richard, age 68, once told me he woke up exhausted every morning despite sleeping nearly 8 hours. His daytime blood pressure readings looked fairly normal, nothing alarming. But later, after more detailed monitoring, it became clear his pressure was staying elevated for much of the night. While he slept, his cardiovascular system never truly relaxed, and he had absolutely no idea. That's why nighttime circulation deserves attention, not fear, just awareness. Now here's something many people don't realize. Certain evening habits may quietly make nighttime pressure patterns worse. One surprising example is alcohol close to bedtime. A lot of people believe alcohol helps them sleep better because it makes them feel relaxed initially. And yes, it can create temporary drowsiness. But several hours later, the body often reacts differently. Stress hormones may rise, sleep becomes fragmented, blood pressure patterns can become more unstable overnight. Many people wake up feeling drained the next morning, without connecting it to what happened hours earlier. This doesn't mean someone can never enjoy a drink. It simply means timing matters more than most people think. Another hidden issue can come from certain herbal products and teas. Some evening teas contain licorice root without people realizing it. Licorice root may affect fluid balance and stress hormone activity in ways that are not ideal for some people with blood pressure concerns. That's why reading labels matters, especially after 60, when the body becomes more sensitive to small daily patterns. Now let's talk about one of the most overlooked tools available today, a 24-hour blood pressure monitor. Some people have never heard of it. Instead of checking pressure once in a clinic, this monitor tracks readings throughout the entire day and night while a person lives normally at home. Sleeping, walking, eating, relaxing. And this can reveal patterns a regular appointment completely misses. A woman named Carol, age 71, had acceptable readings during clinic visits for years, but a longer monitoring test later showed her pressure barely dropped during sleep. That information changed the entire conversation around her health habits. Not because anyone wanted to scare her, but because finally, the full picture became visible. And honestly, that's one of the most important messages in this entire discussion. The body often gives quiet signals long before major problems develop. The challenge is that those signals are easy to miss when nobody looks for them. Now there's another topic that deserves attention: medication timing. Many people automatically take every medication in the morning because that's simply the routine they were given years ago. But depending on the person and the medication, timing can matter. Some medications may support overnight blood pressure patterns more effectively when taken later in the day. However, this is never something people should change on their own. The important thing is having the conversation. That's what matters. Questions matter, awareness matters, participation matters. A lot of older adults grew up believing they shouldn't question medical routines. But being involved in your own healthcare is not being difficult, it's being informed. A simple conversation with a healthcare provider can sometimes uncover options nobody discussed before. Now let's move toward one natural habit that has gained increasing attention over the years: hibiscus tea. Deep red, slightly tart, simple to prepare. Hibiscus contains natural plant compounds associated with blood vessel support and antioxidant activity. Some studies have observed improvements in blood pressure patterns among adults who consumed hibiscus tea regularly as part of a balanced lifestyle. One reason people enjoy it is because it feels calming, not aggressive, not complicated, just a simple evening routine. A man named Leonard, age 66, replaced his second evening coffee with hibiscus tea several nights a week. A few months later, he told me he felt calmer before bed and more refreshed in the mornings. Again, no single habit changes everything overnight. That's important to remember. Health usually improves through combinations of small, consistent decisions, not dramatic overnight transformations. And consistency becomes even more important after 60, because the body responds strongly to rhythm. Regular sleep, calmer evenings, less stress stimulation late at night, better hydration, more supportive daily habits. All these things work together quietly in the background. Now here's something I wish more people understood earlier in life. Your cardiovascular system works every second of every night without asking for attention. Even while you sleep, the heart continues pushing blood through thousands of miles of blood vessels, quietly, constantly, without pause. And after 60, small nightly stresses begin adding up more than they did decades earlier. That's why nighttime habits matter so much. Not perfection, not obsession, just awareness of what repeatedly happens before sleep. For example, many people underestimate how strongly poor sleep itself may affect blood pressure patterns. Every interruption during the night can activate stress responses inside the body. Even brief awakenings. The brain sends signals, stress hormones rise, blood vessels tighten slightly. And if that pattern repeats night after night for years, the cardiovascular system stays under strain far longer than it should. A woman named Helen, age 69, believed she simply had light sleep for most of her adult life. But after paying attention to her nighttime habits, she noticed something interesting: heavy late dinners, television until midnight, frequent waking, poor sleep quality. Over time, she slowly adjusted her routine: earlier dinners, less screen time late at night, calming tea instead of sugary snacks. Nothing extreme. But within weeks, she told me her mornings felt completely different. Clearer mind, steadier energy, less heaviness in her chest when waking up. That's the power of consistent routines. People often search for one dramatic solution while ignoring the small, repeated habits shaping the body every day. Now let's talk about another hidden issue many older adults never hear about: certain combinations of foods and medications. One example involves grapefruit juice. For some medications, grapefruit may interfere with how the body processes them. That can sometimes cause medication levels to stay stronger in the bloodstream longer than intended. Many people assume fruit can never create problems because it sounds healthy. But interactions matter. That's why reading medication instructions carefully and discussing food interactions with a healthcare provider is extremely important. Especially later in life, when the body processes substances differently than it did at 35 or 40. And honestly, this brings us back to one central idea: information matters. The more clearly people understand what affects their body, the more confidently they can make small, helpful adjustments. Without fear, without panic, without feeling overwhelmed. Now I want to mention something else many people overlook completely: morning fatigue. A lot of older adults wake up tired every day and assume it's simply aging, but sometimes the body is working too hard overnight. The cardiovascular system may not be getting the recovery period it needs during sleep. That's why paying attention to patterns matters. Noticing changes, asking questions, being curious about your own health. A man named Thomas, age 73, used to joke that feeling exhausted every morning was just part of getting older. But eventually, he began tracking his sleep, evening habits, hydration, and blood pressure more carefully. And over time, patterns became obvious. Late alcohol made mornings worse. Heavy salty dinners made sleep less restful. Poor hydration affected how he felt the next day. These weren't dramatic discoveries, but together, they changed how he approached his evenings. And little by little, he began feeling better. That's how many meaningful health improvements happen, quietly, one adjustment at a time. Not through fear-based motivation, but through understanding. Now let's bring everything together clearly and simply. First, remember that daytime blood pressure readings do not always tell the full story. Nighttime patterns matter too. Second, pay attention to evening habits that may quietly affect sleep and circulation. Late alcohol, poor sleep routines, hidden ingredients in herbal products, heavy late meals. Third, ask questions during medical appointments, especially about overnight blood pressure patterns and whether additional monitoring may be appropriate for you. And fourth, focus on calm, sustainable habits instead of extreme changes. Supportive evening routines, better sleep consistency, simple nutrition habits, stress reduction. Those things matter more than many people realize. And perhaps most importantly, do not ignore how you feel simply because you're getting older. The body communicates in subtle ways. Persistent fatigue, brain fog, restless sleep, morning heaviness. These things deserve attention, not dismissal. Because healthy aging is not about chasing perfection. It's about giving the body better support year after year. Small habits repeated consistently create powerful long-term effects. A calmer evening routine tonight may not feel dramatic tomorrow morning, but 6 months later, 1 year later, the difference can become meaningful. That's why consistency matters so much more than intensity. And if you take one thing from this video, let it be this. Pay attention to what happens while your body is supposed to be resting. Because nighttime health often shapes daytime life far more than people realize. If this discussion gave you something useful, think about which habit or idea stood out to you most. Sometimes, one small insight is enough to begin making better decisions consistently. And if someone in your life over 60 often complains about poor sleep, morning fatigue, or blood pressure concerns, this information may help them ask better questions too. Take care of yourself. Your heart has carried you through decades of stress, responsibility, memories, setbacks, and victories. Quietly, faithfully, every single day and night. It deserves attention, it deserves support, and it's never too late to build better habits around it. One final reminder before we finish. Everything shared here is general educational information and should never replace personal medical care. Any medication changes, supplement decisions, or health concerns should always be discussed with a qualified healthcare professional who understands your individual situation.